Hello, my name is Jennifer Rose, and today I'll be presenting my research brief entitled The Relation of Social Emotional Learning Programs as a Predictor of Bullying Occurrences in Schools. I chose this as my research brief because as a school psychologist, it's my job to implement programs in all levels in school, helping children to foster positive social emotional learning while trying to reduce instances of bullying. The objectives of this presentation are to provide background information for my research brief, present the findings of the current study, and discuss conclusions and implications of this study. Abstract. The purpose of this research brief is to present results from a study investigating the relationship between the presence of social emotional learning programs in schools K through 12 and the level of bullying that occurs in those schools. I hypothesized that presence of a social emotional learning program in the school would predict lower levels of bullying in the school. In the current study, I found that presence of a social emotional learning program in the school did not predict the level of bullying reported in the school. Possible conclusions are discussed. Introduction. Studies have shown that the number of student reports of bullying in schools have been a growing problem over the years. The number of students between the ages of 12 to 18 who reported being bullied at school has increased at a rate of change of 24.6% from 2003 to 2007, with 7.1% of students reporting having been bullied at school in 2003 and 31.7% of students reporting having been bullied at school in 2007. The study showed that bullying is possibly on the rise. Ease of access to the internet and social media have contributed to the rise in school bullying. Between the years of 2006 to 2012, cyberbullying has increased from 15% to 21%, nearly catching the school bullying rate of 23% by 2012. In a survey of 1,454 12 to 17-year-olds, 72% had experienced at least one online incident of bullying in the past year, and 85% of those who had been bullied online had also been bullied at school. So bullying over the internet carries over into the school. It exacerbates it because of these access with social media. The detrimental effects of bullying are many and far-reaching. Peer victimization is a risk factor for suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts in children and adolescents. Children who are bullied show increased levels of psychological distress, depression, and suicidality. Depression may actually predispose adolescents to bullying. Psychosomatic complaints such as repeated sore throat, colds, breathing problems, nausea, poor appetite, or school worries were found to co-occur with victimization, leading to absenteeism from school. Multiple adverse long-term effects of childhood bullying on victims and perpetrators have been implicated. Both bullies and victims suffer later financial, social, behavioral, and health problems, with victims showing the most impairment in psychiatric and overall health, and bullies showing increased risk for illegal behaviors and psychiatric problems. Adults who had been bullied as children had a higher prevalence of agoraphobia, generalized anxiety, and panic disorder, while bully victims were at increased risk for depression, panic disorder, agoraphobia, and suicidality. Bullies only were at increased risk for antisocial personality disorder. One approach schools are taking in an attempt to reduce bullying is to implement social emotional learning programs, or SEL programs. Payton et al. 2000 describes social emotional learning programs as systematic classroom instruction that enhances children's capacities to recognize and manage their emotions, appreciate the perspectives of others, establish pro-social goals and solve problems, and use a variety of interpersonal skills to effectively and ethically handle developmentally relevant tasks. SEL programs are not only aimed at reducing bullying in schools, but they are also designed on the premise of preventing bullying from occurring in the first place. Many studies cite the efficacy of such programs in preventing problem behaviors while promoting children's health and character development. A 3-year study of the evidence-based SEL Second Step program followed 6th grade students who were identified as having a disability and found their bullying perpetration skill scores decreased significantly over the course of the 3-year study compared with students in the control condition. The effects of the Second Step program on 1,253 second through 4th grade students were studied and found greater improvement in teacher ratings of their social competence, positive goal setting, and decreased aggressiveness. Lower levels of hostile attribution bias, depression, conduct problems, aggressive strategies, and higher levels of competent interpersonal strategies were found when higher levels of the SEL program, Resolving Conflict Creatively program, were implemented in the classroom in grades 1 through 6. The total number was 11,160. Excuse me. A 42% decrease was found in self-reports of physical aggression by 6th grade students compared with control students after 1 year of implementation of the Second Step program. In a study of children grades 3 through 6 who received instruction in the multi-level bullying intervention Steps to Success program, the intervention group children demonstrated declines in bullying and argumentative behavior, increases in agreeable interactions, and reduced destructive bystander behavior. So some of the SEL programs that are being implemented in school are showing efficacy in reducing school bullying. Rationale for examining the data. Given the potential long-lasting detrimental effects of bullying on school-aged children, stakeholders are faced with the task of how to address bullying behavior in the schools effectively. Victims, perpetrators are at much greater risk of experiencing academic difficulties, engaging in substance use, engaging in violent behavior later in life, experiencing negative health effects, and developing mental health problems such as anxiety and depression, and engaging in suicide-related behaviors. As they grow into adulthood, these children may need mental health counseling, substance abuse counseling, doctor's visits for health concerns, become involved with the legal system, corrections agencies, and miss more days of work due to the aforementioned factors, all of which can have a significant economic impact on society. If research supports the effectiveness of implementing social-emotional learning programs in schools with resulting effects of decreases in bullying, then schools could become proactive in the endeavor of reducing and preventing bullying behavior along with its harmful consequences. Purpose and research question. The focus of this paper is to explore the amount of bullying that occurs in schools where social-emotional learning programs are implemented in comparison to the amount of bullying that occurs in schools where no social-emotional learning programs are in place. This study used data from the School Survey on Crime and Safety, SSOCS 2000, which included crime and safety data given by principals and administrators of 2,270 public schools in the United States. The data was used to correlate school characteristics with violent and serious crimes in U.S. schools. The present study examined the relationship between the presence of social-emotional learning programs in schools and the amount of bullying that occurs in these schools. Specifically, does implementation of social-emotional learning programs in schools predict lower amounts of bullying in schools? Methods. Participants. Participants for this analysis included the original 2,270 public primary, middle, high, and combined schools of the 3,366 in which questionnaires were sent whose principals or administrators submitted usable questionnaires regarding the school crime and safety data from the School Survey on Crime and Safety. study on behalf of the United States Department of Education from March 27, 2000 to August 15, 2000. The purpose of the original study was to correlate school characteristics with violent and serious violent crimes in U.S. schools, as well as to assess what prevention programs, practices, and policies were in place in those schools. Findings in the original study were used to identify emerging problems and to gauge safety of U.S. schools. Measures: social emotional learning programs. Schools with implemented social emotional learning programs were identified from submitted questionnaires as any school providing some form of social skills training to their students. Of the 2,270 submitted questionnaires, 1,431 schools, or 63%, were identified as implementing prevention training to their students. 227 schools, or 10%, had no prevention training in place, and 612 schools, 27%, were not ascertained or not applicable. Bullying. How often student bullying occurs was reported as happens daily, with a frequency of 270, 11.9%, happens at least once a week, frequency 468, 20.6%, happens at least once a month, frequency 484, 21.3%, happens on occasion, frequency 1001, 44.1%, and never happens, frequency 47, 2.1%. Analysis. A univariate analysis of variance was conducted to examine the relationship between the presence of social-emotional learning programs in schools K through 12 and the level of bullying that occurs in those schools compared to the level of bullying that occurs in schools without social skills training programs in place. Previous studies have found that the level of bullying in schools may be moderated by implementing research-based social-emotional learning programs for students at all grade levels. This ANOVA looked only at the variables of presence of social skills programs in the school and level of school bullying. The results. Below are the tables of the univariate analysis of variance, the between subject factors, and I will describe these in my results section below. The descriptive statistics, the dependent variable, how often student bullying occurs, tests of between subjects effects, dependent variable, how often student bullying occurs, the estimated marginal means, prevention training, estimates, dependent variable, how often student bullying occurs, pairwise comparisons, dependent variable, how often student bullying occurs, univariate tests, dependent variable, how often student bullying occurs, I compared the average number of occurrences of school bullying in schools where social emotional learning programs were in place to the average number of occurrences of school bullying in schools with no social skills training in place. 63%, 1,431, of the schools in this study had social skills training programs in place, whereas 10%, 227, of the schools had no social skills training programs in place. In schools with prevention training, the mean occurrence of student bullying was 2.96, with a mean of 2.96, standard deviation 1.109. In schools with no prevention training, the mean occurrences of student bullying was 2.99, mean 2.99, standard deviation 1.095. The confidence intervals indicate 95% confidence that the population average for student bullying occurrences in schools with prevention training falls between 2.905 and 3.020, whereas student bullying occurrences in schools without prevention training falls between 2.843 and 3.131. The confidence intervals did overlap, which indicates the two estimates are deemed to be not significantly different. With an F value of 0.096, the significance level of the ANOVA is 0.757, which is greater than the critical value of alpha, A equals 0.05, and therefore the effect of the independent variable, social skills training, is insignificant. Since the effects are found to be non-significant, the differences between the means are not great enough to rule out a chance or sampling error explanation. Thus, the null hypothesis that there is no difference among the means cannot be rejected. R squared, the presence of variance explained by the model, has a value of 0.000. Adjusted R squared equals negative 0.001, which indicates that presence of a social skills training program in the school lends no predictive value as to the level of student bullying that occurs in the school. Discussion. This study used data from the School Survey on Crime and Safety 2000 to examine the relationship between the presence of social emotional learning programs in schools K through 12 and the level of bullying that occurs in those schools. A significant difference was not found between the occurrences of student bullying in schools with social skills training compared to the occurrences of student bullying in schools without social skills training. Mean occurrences of student bullying did not decrease with presence of a social emotional learning program as initially predicted. Intervention implications. Fostering social and emotional health in children through SEL programs can provide prevention and treatment of emotional, mental, and behavioral disorders as cited in previous studies. Increased emotional intelligence promotes emotional self-regulation, improved self-esteem, effective communication, inclusion, and enhanced problem-solving abilities, which, all of these factors taken together, aim at decreasing student bullying in the school. Given the potential benefits of implementing social emotional learning programs in the school setting, this data may help guide educators and stakeholders in choosing quality SEL programs that are evidence-based. Limitations and conclusions. The current study merely included schools that implemented any type of social skills training. It was not indicated which social skills programs were being implemented or whether they were evidence-based programs. The quality of the SEL programs was unknown. The fidelity with which the programs were implemented is also unknown. The SEL programs may or may not have been implemented as designed. Schools may not be aware of the effectiveness of the SEL programs they are implementing and may not follow through with the program after the initial implementation, which decreases the efficacy of the program. Future research should focus on SEL programs that are evidence-based and are implemented with fidelity, further delineating the effectiveness of each program. In closing, as school bullying continues to be on the rise with its detrimental and long-lasting effects, schools must take action to support students' emotional, mental, and behavioral health in efforts to decrease student bullying. By enacting prevention measures such as evidence-based social-emotional learning programs, many of the deleterious effects of bullying, such as low self-esteem, depression, and suicidality, may be ameliorated while fostering emotional intelligence. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Below are the references.